When Tiberius ascended to the imperial throne, Rome stood at the height of its expanding power. Augustus's long rule had strengthened the empire, but it had also quieted many fires of ambition, fires that now waited for the slightest breeze to rise again. Tiberius himself was a man of restraint, discipline, and a certain coldness, yet no one denied his skill. For years he had managed Rome's military and administrative machinery with order. Which road had collapsed, which province had paid less tax, where discipline had weakened among the legions, everything was clear in his mind. Far to the northern frontier, a young general named Germanicus was winning victory after victory. He was the darling of Rome, adored by the masses and worshipped by the soldiers. Tiberius claimed to love him like a son. After all, he had adopted him under Augustus's design. But whispers crept through the streets, the Senate halls, and even the palace corridors. Germanicus, not Tiberius, was the true heir Rome deserved. The rumors slithered across marble floors and into the emperor's ears. Though Tiberius never showed anger, shadows in the Senate portico grew darker, and the eyes of imperial informers watched everything with renewed sharpness. Political tension rose quietly. Eastern traders wanted lower taxes. Commanders in distant provinces demanded more autonomy. Senators pushed for a lighter imperial hand. Tiberius studied all this in silence, an unsettling, calculating silence. Some called it fear. Others thought he was waiting for the right moment to unleash a storm.
Tiberius received the news with a face carved from stone. He ordered an investigation, instructed the Senate to remain calm, and refused to show grief, anger, or fear. But Rome ignored these instructions. Germanicus was too beloved. His death became a wound on the empire itself. His widow, Agrippina, returned to Rome with ashes and fury in her eyes. She believed her husband had been murdered. In her voice lay the threat of a political storm. The empire slid into quiet unrest. Senators debated in secret chambers, some forming alliances with Agrippina's supporters. Many questioned the emperor's motives. Tiberius responded with increased vigilance, demanding loyalty from every corner of the empire. Privately, he began relying more heavily on Sejanus, perhaps too heavily. Sejanus expanded his influence with the precision of a master strategist. Those who questioned him were accused of treason. Some were exiled, others executed. Fear seeped into Rome's marble veins. Tiberius, exhausted and deeply distrustful of men, withdrew. Sejanus suggested he retired to the island of Capri for rest. What seemed like advice was in truth a careful manipulation. Tiberius left for Capri. The island offered serenity, deep blue waters, quiet cliffs, the distant sound of the sea. But it also offered isolation. From there, the emperor ruled by correspondence, issuing orders through messengers, while Sejanus controlled the daily machinery of Rome. In the capital, Sejanus behaved less like an advisor and more like a ruler in everything but name. His luxury grew, his self-importance swelled, and his cruelty sharpened. People whispered in dark corners, "Sejanus wants the throne." Senators who had once feared Tiberius now feared this rising tyrant even more. Eventually, a few brave ones sent secret messages to Capri, messages that contained evidence of Sejanus's hidden ambitions. Tiberius studied each letter with the same cold thoroughness he had shown throughout his life. The proofs were unmistakable. Sejanus was plotting to seize power, perhaps even planning the emperor's death. The old ruler, tired though he was, made a decision, a quiet one, a final one. In Rome, on what seemed an ordinary day, the Senate convened. Sejanus entered with his usual pride, expecting another step toward full authority. But instead of honor, he found cold faces and tense silence. A decree was read aloud, an imperial order from Capri. Sejanus was to be arrested for treason. Shock ran through the room like a cold wind. Sejanus froze, disbelief etched across his face. The Praetorian soldiers he once commanded stepped forward and seized him. Outside, as the news spread, Rome erupted. Some cheered with relief, others trembled with fear, wondering who might fall next. Sejanus's allies were hunted down, tried, or executed. Stability returned, but not peace. Agrippina and her sons were targeted next. Tiberius, convinced they threatened Rome, or perhaps his own fragile sense of order, had them exiled. To many, he now appeared severe, even cruel. His absence from Rome fueled speculation. Was he afraid, or was he orchestrating everything with long-distance precision? In the bustling streets, a young writer named Vespasian wandered through the city at night. He listened to soldiers and vendors and aging veterans. The emperor is harsh, some said, but he pays the army on time, others answered. Roads stay repaired, borders hold. But he is not happy. His eyes look tired. Even from Capri we can feel it. Night after night, Vespasian wrote notes, observing a city caught between fear and order, between stability and suffocation. Rome obeyed Tiberius, yet did not love him. They respected his discipline, but did not admire his heart. On Capri, the emperor watched the waves crash against the cliffs. His life had been a long march through power. Augustus's adoption, military triumphs, betrayals, whispers, responsibilities too heavy for any man. Germanicus's memory haunted him. Suspicion had become a permanent companion. He wanted peace, but peace had no place in an empire built by conquest. In his final days, Tiberius felt life withdrawing like a tide. He wondered, silently, whether he had been a good ruler or a misunderstood one. History, he knew, would never agree on his character. He whispered in a faint voice, "I protected Rome as best I could. The rest is for others to judge." In 37 AD, Tiberius died. Rome braced itself. A new figure was ready to rise, young Caligula, ambitious and unpredictable. With him would begin another tumultuous chapter in Rome's long and stormy history. As for Tiberius, he remained one of Rome's most complex rulers, disciplined yet distant, capable yet feared, a guardian of order and a prisoner of his own isolation. His reign was neither pure light nor complete darkness. It was a shifting mixture of both, carved into the story of an empire that demanded everything and gave no man rest. And in that mixture lies the true legacy of Tiberius, an emperor who carried the empire's weight until it consumed him.
When the news of Tiberius's death reached Rome, the city erupted, not in mourning, but in a strange mixture of relief, excitement, and anticipation. The old emperor had been distant for so long that many Romans felt as though the empire had been ruled by a shadow. Now, that shadow had finally lifted, and behind it stood a young, charismatic figure, Gaius Caesar, known to all by his childhood nickname, Caligula, the little soldier's boots. The name had once been a playful gesture by the legions who adored Germanicus's son. Now, it carried the weight of an empire. Caligula's arrival in Rome was like a festival. People gathered on rooftops, lined the streets, and hung garlands of fresh flowers from balconies. Children ran ahead of the crowds, shouting, "A new golden age begins!" Old veterans, once loyal to Germanicus, saluted with tears in their eyes. After years of suspicion and secrecy under Tiberius, the return of a familiar and beloved bloodline felt like the return of the sun after a long winter. Caligula stepped out of his carriage with an easy smile. His bright, youthful face and energetic gestures created an atmosphere Tiberius never had. Ministers bowed deeply. Senators rushed forward to greet him. Even prisoners destined for execution were pardoned that day, as if mercy had descended suddenly from the heavens. The people believed they had found a hero. For a time, it seemed they were right. One of Caligula's first acts was to honor his deceased parents. Statues of Germanicus were restored, public games were funded in his memory, and Agrippina's name, long tarnished under Tiberius, was spoken openly again. Caligula also recalled political exiles, abolished certain harsh laws, distributed gifts of money to citizens, and promised an administration built on transparency and generosity. Rome rejoiced. The Senate applauded. The streets overflowed with celebration. But beneath the surface of applause and rose petals, the machinery of empire still moved with its old complexity. Every senator carried ambitions. Every general held private loyalties. Every noble family remembered past offenses. Caligula, though adored by the public, walked through a palace full of silent calculations. Months passed. Then the first cracks appeared.
A strange fever struck Caligula, one so severe that many believed he would die. The empire held its breath. Senators began whispering about succession. Crowds gathered at temples, pleading with the gods to spare their young emperor. When Caligula finally recovered, Rome erupted in joy again. But something in him had changed. The smile remained, but its warmth had cooled. His laughter grew sharper, less natural. At times, he stared at senators as if weighing whether they were allies or prey. Stories spread that he wandered the palace halls at night, speaking to statues as if they were alive. His behavior toward the Senate hardened. He mocked certain members openly, overturned their decisions without explanation, and spoke of expanding his personal powers. "The empire belongs not to the Senate, but to me, as a shepherd holds authority over his flock." Some senators bristled, others grew fearful. None dared to speak openly. Meanwhile, Caligula burdened the treasury with extravagant spectacles. Gladiatorial games expanded to impossible scale. Naval battles were staged on artificial lakes. Gold flowed like water. The people enjoyed it, of course, but Rome's accountants trembled. Quietly, one financial officer whispered, "Such spending is unsustainable. Not even Augustus dared to display such excess." But Caligula would not listen. He felt the adoration of the masses with a hunger that only grew as the months passed. He wanted more. More monuments, more festivals, more worship. He demanded that temples include statues of him alongside the gods. In one particularly striking episode, he stood before a crowd and proclaimed that the gods themselves rejoiced at his reign. Whispers began to spread. Had the young emperor lost himself in the reflection of his own power? In the darkest corners of taverns and private gardens, people murmured stories of Caligula's sudden rages. Servants disappeared overnight. Messengers returned pale and trembling. Some claimed the emperor believed conspiracies surrounded him. Others said he simply enjoyed testing how far his authority reached. Still, no one dared to oppose him. Rome had known cruelty before. It had survived emperors far more violent. But what unsettled the city most was the unpredictability. "He is generous one day," said a baker at the marketplace. "The next day he orders a noble's execution." A veteran nodded grimly. "It is not cruelty we fear. It is madness." In the Senate, one man in particular took note of these shifts. Cassius Chaerea, a seasoned officer of the Praetorian Guard. He had served under Tiberius, and now under the new emperor. At first, he supported Caligula like everyone else, but Caligula mocked him cruelly, humiliating him in front of soldiers. With each insult,
something hardened quietly inside Chaerea. Still, he waited, and Rome continued to change. Caligula began ambitious construction projects, bridges, palaces, aqueducts, some practical, some absurdly symbolic. One of the strangest was his temporary floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae, built only so he could ride his horse across the sea, proving a prophecy wrong. Crowds gathered to watch. Many cheered. Others whispered that the emperor had slipped into delusion. By the third year of his reign, the Senate had grown quiet and fearful, the treasury dangerously thin, and the Praetorian Guard increasingly divided in loyalty. Rome still adored its emperor publicly, but the laughter and celebrations grew nervous, and the cheers had a hollow echo. One night, as torches flickered across the marble walls of the palace, Chaerea gathered a small group of officers. Their faces were tense. Their decision was dangerous, treasonous. But each man believed the same. If Caligula continued his path, Rome might collapse into chaos. Chaerea spoke only one sentence. For the safety of Rome, the emperor must fall. The others nodded. In the heart of the empire, beneath the golden ceilings and the grand statues of gods and heroes, a new storm was preparing to break, one that would end the reign of the man Rome had once hailed as its shining hope.